Well, it's hard to believe, but we're just over the halfway mark here in our course, ready to push on, of course, with our next principle in strategic communication. And this week, we're going to look at the very important concept of feedback. So as you can see here on our module's front page, feedback is really a way of discussing the value of dialogue in any professional venture, especially those, not surprisingly, involving a team or group dynamic. Now, this premise may seem more or less like common sense, given the fact that working collectively, whether you're in the position of learning new skills or instructing others, can hardly proceed effectively without engaging with each other discursively. The very process of information flow is based on the exchange of ideas from one source to another. But just because ideas are being exchanged doesn't necessarily mean that the parties involved are actually in dialogue with one another. Dialogue typically depends upon enquiry, implying that at some level, every statement we make in the presence of others can be considered persuasive only if it provokes questions and responses. Even if these replies are simply requests for clarification, any feedback is usually good feedback. As we'll discuss in detail in our forum discussion, specifically with reference to communication theory, no message can travel very far or very consistently in just one singular pulse, regardless of how clear we believe the original signal to be. Now, you'll probably remember from our overview to this course how we discussed the essential diversity of most contemporary professional situations. Well, our methods, tools, and techniques to be featured this week all highlight this diversity as another essential resource for maximizing, possibly even elevating communication within these environments. Diversity in opinion, whether due to multiple cultural, economic, or educational backgrounds in forming a single project, can certainly provoke more than its fair share of argument and debate, even to the extent that reliable communication can often seem threatened. In these examples, feedback begins to take on exactly those qualities we usually associate with it when we're thinking of acoustic noise in an endless sound loop between, let's say, an audio input or an audio output, like a guitar, for example, placed too close to a loudspeaker. Okay, now granted, there are many fine electric guitarists in the history of rock and roll that have obviously learned how to manipulate such loops quite harmoniously. Yet engaging feedback as a productive aid to project management sometimes requires us to be less tolerant of the sound loop in favor of other modes, like extrapolation, or feedback as a shortcut, feedback as innovation, and, surprisingly, feedback as complication through additional detail. One of our key focuses this week will be on techniques in writing and presentation that are able to procure exactly these modes while mitigating the less desirable, noisier forms. The digital era has made it possible to provide near instantaneous peer review and critical commentary on just about any group assignment. Project developers, even if they're thousands of miles away from each other, are still able to work together almost as if they were side by side, making the value of feedback ever more vital to any task or procedure being undertaken. This week, we're going to learn two important goals. One, the value of revision, the value of interaction and dialogue, and how they're all related to each other. And secondly, techniques to solicit strong feedback, and by strong I mean those that open up negotiations in order to build communal interaction, not restrict it in any way. We'll be using a presentation review tool like VoiceThread, and with it you're going to proceed with some very basic communication theory principles. Some of them we've already taken. We'll learn how instructional designers transmit or distribute their ideas in order to solicit strong feedback. So you may not think that the project leader that you're working with wants that feedback, but in fact, maybe there's something in her actual comments that's trying to provoke or procure exactly the type of feedback she needs to get the project going. As you can probably guess, if you're to choose one discussion forum this week, due to time constraints, to make a productive contribution, I think this is the one that might be most thematically consistent. So feel free to give us all a bit of feedback on what you think of feedback, and any tricks you have for gauging just when its more productive aspects begin to fade and give way to blockage, possibly even group disintegration. All right, see you in 1 week.